by House members, senators, and invited guests to give his third State of the State address. Now, we kind of already have an idea what the governor will be talking about because we've seen his budget proposal. That rolled out last week when lawmakers came back to Columbia at the same time. And what we'll be seeing is that the governor will be talking again about an education spending budget. He wants to give teachers more pay raises and expand 4K preschool. And that's something we've already seen some momentum for as well. So we're actually going to wait to see the governor walk into the Statehouse chamber right now. And we're going to Mitch Dorman, who is the Sergeant at Arms in the House, introducing the governor.
Our honorable governor and his escort committee has arrived.
Please rise to receive His Excellency, the Governor, and his distinguished escort committee.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And what you're seeing and what you're hearing right now is Governor Henry McMaster walking into the House chamber. Now, this is a joint assembly with House and Senate lawmakers, so there's about 170 lawmakers in there waiting to hear his speech. We've seen greeting House members, Representative Golda Cobb-Hunter, and he's walking in there with Senate Pro Tem Hugh Leatherman, I guess Finance Chairman, I should say. And he's making his way to the dais there, where we're going to hear the governor give his speech. The speech usually runs about 30 to 45 minutes. And again, like I said, we've already kind of heard some of the big ticket proposals that the governor is going to roll out because he put those in his budget earlier this month. Now, again, it's the governor's budget. It's a proposal. It goes to the House, which is now crafting the budget for the state. And the state has an extra $1.8 billion to spend this year. So expect the governor to talk about what to do with that money and be on the lookout for him to talk about tax reforms and rebates as well. So he's actually getting up there to the dais. And here's Senate President Harvey Peeler, who's about to introduce the governor. He's up there with House Speaker Jay Lucas. This is Senate President Harvey Peeler is about to speak.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the Joint Assembly and honored guests, I am proud to present to you the Honorable Henry McMaster, Governor of South Carolina.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Y'all, thank you so much. If you will, be seated, please. This is a glorious night. I'm happy to be here. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the General Assembly, constitutional officers, my fellow South Carolinians, I begin tonight by recognizing those South Carolinians in uniform no longer with us, who gave their lives in the line of duty and in service to us all. Deputy Michael S. Latu of the Marion County Sheriff's Office, Fire Engineer Paul Quattlebaum of the Lexington County Fire Service, Officer Jackson Winkler of the Florence Regional Airport Department of Public Safety. To the families and loved ones of these three men, on behalf of all South Carolinians, we share your sadness, honor their service, and wish you strength. Thank you. I am delighted to have with us once again tonight our First Lady, my bride Peggy, who's working to bring attention and energy to the areas of human trafficking, domestic violence, veterans' health, and animal care and adoption. Thank you, Peggy Jean. Please stand and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. I'd also like to thank our cabinet members for their innovative, dedicated, and sustained efforts to improve the lives and futures of our people. We are winning because they are succeeding, and there is much more to come. Will our cabinet members please stand up and be recognized? Please stand. Thank you. Our Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evett is meeting with businesses across the state to identify workforce and regulatory relief. She's focused on transportation, early childhood education, and preparation for the upcoming census, and encourage all of us to grab a bag and eliminate litter. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Evett. Please stand up, and there's your husband, David. Stand and be recognized, please. We also have a visitor from out of town, former governor of Wisconsin, who joins us tonight, Governor Scott Walker. Please stand and be recognized. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I'm proud to tell you that the state of our state is strong. South Carolina is winning. Since last I spoke to you in this forum, things have changed. Our state has gotten stronger, but so have other states. We are today in the fiercest economic competition we've ever seen. It's with the other southeastern states, which are experiencing the greatest growth in the nation. But we have all we need in our state to win, and we shall win. The nation's economy is booming, and so is ours. We are roaring into the 20s with a vibrant economy and a growing population. In the last 3 years alone, we've announced nearly $10 billion in new capital investment and almost 35,000 new jobs. That's unprecedented. More people are working in South Carolina than ever before. Unemployment is at a record low, and personal income growth is at the highest ever. We are consistently rated as one of the best places in the country to live, work, and raise a family. Business growth in South Carolina is the business of South Carolina. And I'd like to recognize some of our companies that are here tonight. Representing Adornis Cabinetry, Mr. George Mejias, CEO, and his wife, Maria Mejias. Will he stand, please, be recognized? Welcome. Representing GE Appliances, a hire company, Mr. Frank Scheffel and Mr. Bill Good. Will you please stand? Welcome. And representing Spartan Motors, their counsel, Ms. Stephanie Few. Please stand, ma'am. Welcome. And representing McCall Farms, Mr. Marion Swink, president and co-owner, and his wife, Ms. Frances Swink. Will you please let us welcome you? And representing Lockheed Martin, Mr. Ben Pete and Mr. Nick Massenberg. Please stand. Welcome. All right. Among the General Assembly's steps forward last year were a record number of the recommendations I made to you, and you accepted. After careful consideration, I offer these to you tonight. Last year, our budget from state funds totaled $9.33 billion. This year, we are expecting to exceed those revenues by a whopping $1.8 billion. As with the growth in the nation's economy, most economists were surprised by this growth. Last year, we returned $67 million to the taxpayers in a one-time rebate check. It was well received, to say the least. This year, I propose that we return 25 cents of every surplus dollar back to the taxpayers through rebates and tax cuts. It's their money. They earned it. It's their money. Many people don't believe it, but reduces taxes in fact results in tax receipts increasing, not decreasing. It happened when President Kennedy did it, again when President Reagan did it, and it's happening now under President Trump. North Carolina and Georgia, two of our strongest competitors, have just done it, bringing their income taxes down lower than ours. There's a misconception that our effective rate after deductions is lower than our neighbors. This misconception was explained in the 2018 study by the Tax Foundation for the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, and found it to be just that, a misconception. A direct comparison of effective rates and actual taxes in North Carolina and Georgia shows that our taxes are lower only for the lowest income filers in our state. South Carolina has the highest personal income tax rate in the Southeast and the 12th highest in the nation. 7 states have no income taxes at all. Taxes of all kinds at all levels add up quickly, little by little, and they smother growth. Money spent by the people who work to earn it goes farther, more efficiently, and produces more dividends for them and us than the same dollars spent by government. Therefore, I ask that we cut our state's personal income taxes by $160 million this first year for a total of $2.6 billion over 5 years. This means a 15% across-the-board reduction for all personal income brackets, keeping us competitive with our neighboring states. I ask that we send, go ahead. I also ask that we send $250 million from the surplus back to the South Carolina taxpayers in the form of a rebate check, an average of $200 per taxpayer. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, with a $1.8 billion surplus, if we don't cut taxes and send money back to the people, then shame on us. And for the 3rd year in a row, I ask that we honor the service and sacrifice of our men and women who served in uniform, veterans, first responders, law enforcement officers, firefighters, and peace officers, by no longer taxing their retirement pay. This commitment to our veterans will help us in protecting and expanding missions at our state's military bases, of which we have 8. As for law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders, it will help keep them on the job, aid recruitment, and show our appreciation for their service. Joining us tonight are men and women from the South Carolina National Guard and from our state law enforcement agencies who walk that thin blue line every day. We cannot prosper without them. I ask them to please stand and be recognized. And we thank you. We cannot thank you enough. Ladies and gentlemen, the path to prosperity goes straight through the classroom. Last year, we took bold steps in education reform to empower the next generation's workforce. We invested in our classroom teachers in rural schools and keeping our children safe and secure. This year, our continued investment must be the most significant ever. Remember, we are in fierce competition. Teachers are leaving the classroom most before their 5th year. Last year, we raised the salaries of all South Carolina teachers. This year, I ask you to give each teacher an additional $3,000 raise, which equates to an average 7% raise per teacher. The impact of this investment will be dramatic and immediate. South Carolina will vault into the top 25 national ranking for average teacher pay. We now rank 41st. We will surpass the Southeastern average for the first time in many of our lives, and the minimum starting salary for new teachers will have jumped 26% in the last 3 years to $38,000. These critical investments are important. They will help attract the best and the brightest young people into the profession and keep our highly successful and experienced teachers where they're needed most, and that's in the classroom. Tonight, we are joined by several of our most successful and experienced teachers. As I say your name, please stand and be recognized, and stay standing, and we will clap at the end. Ms. Allie Hendrick from Dutch Fork High School is a social studies teacher and was former Lexington Richland School District 5 Teacher of the Year. Ms. Tiffany Hobart is the current Teacher of the Year for Pickens Elementary in Pickens, South Carolina, where she teaches 4K. Ms. Shonda Jefferson is the South Carolina Teacher of the Year for 2020. She teaches biology and science at Fairfield Central High School. Mr. Jeff Maxey is a special education teacher in Anderson School District 3 and former State Teacher of the Year in 2019. Ms. Laura Previtt is a school counselor at North Hartsville Elementary and former Darlington School District Teacher of the Year. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your service to our state. Thank you. We know that by the age of 4, the average lower-income child in America has heard about 40 million words in his or her lifetime. The average upper-income child, on the other hand, heard about 70 million words. They call this the 30 million word gap, and it dramatically affects a child's ability to learn. Our lower-income 5-year-old children are increasingly entering kindergarten unprepared to learn, lacking the necessary literacy and language skills. Ladies and gentlemen, they are unlikely to ever catch up. By the 3rd grade, they are at risk and less likely to graduate or obtain the skills necessary to enter the workforce and contribute to our economy and to their own success. The facts are clear. To change the path of a child's future, to enhance the prosperity of our economy, to maximize the success of our state, we have to make sure that every student is ready to learn when he or she enters the classroom. In 2006, the General Assembly funded full-day 4-year-old kindergarten programs for Medicaid-eligible children in public schools and private child care centers. Currently, 62 school districts are eligible to participate, but 17 school districts are not eligible to participate. This leaves 13,000 lower-income, at-risk children in 17 urban and suburban school districts without the option to attend full-day 4-year-old kindergarten. I ask that you join me in providing every lower-income 4-year-old child in South Carolina the opportunity to attend full-day kindergarten at the public, private, parochial, or religious institution of their parents' choosing. That's right, the parents can choose where the child goes to school. What will this do? This will unleash the free market into early childhood education through parental choice. We will eliminate red tape and regulations while increasing the reimbursement rate, that is, the money that already follows each child to the school of the parent's choice. Ladies and gentlemen, the time is now to act, to take dramatic and decisive action to secure our prosperity for generations to come and to assure all of South Carolina's parents that their children will not be left behind. Last year, Speaker Lucas, President Peel, and I called on the State Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office to review South Carolina's outdated education funding formula. In October, they told us what we already knew. The way we fund education is confusing, not working, and is no longer sustainable. Although there is no easy solution, we know that education reform means accountability, efficiency, and transparency for local school boards and administrators. It also means removing outdated, inefficient, and confusing testing and paperwork. And it means the consolidation of districts to reduce overhead, create efficiencies, and put more dollars in the classroom. We must have a new path forward. The House has passed a comprehensive education reform bill, and the Senate is currently debating their version. I ask that these two versions be reconciled and sent to my desk as soon as possible so I can sign it into law and we can get to work. We must also continue our efforts to make our public universities and colleges, technical and comprehensive, more accessible and affordable for all South Carolinians. Last year, we took a dramatic step by freezing college tuition for in-state students. I urge you to do it again this year by providing a 5% funding increase for each institution that doesn't raise tuition. With this surplus, we can also make a historic one-time investment towards repairing aging campus buildings and infrastructure. We should pay down the state's deferred maintenance costs while we can, now, rather than borrowing much more money in the future to do it. Many of our young people can't afford college without scholarships, grants, and financial assistance. I ask that you provide an additional $164 million for needs-based scholarships and grants to open the door of opportunity for those students. I also ask that the state pay 100% of college tuition for active duty members of the South Carolina Army or Air National Guard. We're fortunate to have several college presidents with us tonight, and I will ask them to stand and we will give them a warm welcome. Dr. Rosalind Clark Artis of Benedict College, would you please stand? Dr. Jim Clements of Clemson University, would you please stand? And Dr. David Cole of the Medical University of South Carolina. Welcome. We thank you for what you're doing. Recently, I had the honor of welcoming the new president of the University of South Carolina to our state. President Bob Caslin, a three-star general, retired in 2018 after serving 43 years in uniform and leading more than 200,000 soldiers under 9 commanders-in-chief and deploying 6 times. He served for years as the superintendent of West Point, establishing records and success across the board. He's here. I'd like to tell you a quick story about him that he won't tell you. On 9/11, General Caslin was working at the Pentagon. When Flight 77 hit the building, everyone was evacuated. You, of course, remember the scene. Ignoring warnings, General Caslin ran back into the burning building to search for wounded and to reestablish communications with the White House. President Caslin and Ms. Shirley Caslin are here with us tonight. Would you please stand and be recognized? About as soon as he got here, President Caslin gave me an idea. He suggested that we allow our colleges and universities to spend more of their privately raised dollars for needs-based scholarships. It's a great idea, and I ask that the General Assembly embrace it. According to U.S. News and World Report, South Carolina is ranked in the top 5% nationally for high potential job growth. especially in manufacturing, technology, healthcare, and engineering fields. However, competition for workers is fierce because there just aren't enough of them. Some businesses are struggling, not because of lack of customers, but because they can't find enough staff. Right now in South Carolina, we have around 70,000 jobs looking for people. 70,000 jobs looking for people. The demand for workers in the skilled trades, plumbing, masonry, carpentry, and others, high-paying jobs, is so great that our businesses have to go out of state to recruit them. We know that economic prosperity does not require a 4-year degree. It can be achieved through 2-year associate degrees and a multitude of certificates from our state's technical colleges. Recently, Superintendent of Education Molly Spearman and I visited a very special place called the Continuum. It's located in Lake City. The Continuum is a regional center for workforce education and training for high school students and adults. It was created through collaboration between the Darla Moore Foundation, Florence Darlington Technical College, Francis Marion University, and local businesses. This state-of-the-art career center provides students with training, certifications, dual credit courses, along with business incubator space. Superintendent Spearman proposed that we replicate this model in rural school districts by providing a state match for collaborations between technical colleges, school districts, and businesses. I ask that you approve my budget request of $50 million for this effort. In this economy, when we have jobs looking for people, there's no reason for anyone who can work not to be working, including able-bodied people on public assistance. We must leave no stone unturned to help our state's businesses fill those jobs with skilled, educated, and trained workers. Last year, I issued an executive order requiring able-bodied Medicaid recipients to pursue 80 hours a month of community engagement, education, job training, or employment. In December, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services approved these requirements. Welfare to work is one of the great successes in American public policy over the last 25 years. There's no reason Medicaid to work can't be just as effective, and I believe in South Carolina it will be. By directing more resources towards enhancing workforce training, development, and education than ever before, all the assets and opportunities are in place to help South Carolinians achieve and sustain financial independence and prosperity now and in the future. We must also continue to invest in our infrastructure. Our ports, roads, and rail remain the central drivers of our economic prosperity. The South Carolina Ports Authority is a powerful economic engine. Its container volumes have doubled over the last decade, making it the nation's 9th busiest container port, and it's growing. We are now deepening the harbor. Once this is completed, Charleston will have the deepest harbor on the eastern seaboard, allowing the huge post-Panamax ships to move even more cargo and containers into and out of our state. The economic growth accompanying this will set even more records. Through the 2 inland ports in Greer and Dillon, 25% of the port's total volume now moves by rail to and from the marine terminals, doubling intermodal volume since 2012. Completing the Leatherman Terminal in North Charleston will take more traffic off low-country bridges and highways and onto barges and trains. I want to thank everybody at the Ports Authority for their hard work. In particular, I'd like to recognize Chairman Bill Stern, CEO Jim Newsom, and COO Barbara Melvin. Will you please stand and let us thank you? South Carolina's bright economic future requires an abundant supply of clean, affordable energy. Without it, we are at a competitive disadvantage. I believe every member is aware of the situation facing the solvency and future of Santee Cooper. In the coming days, the General Assembly will receive proposals and will decide Santee Cooper's fate. The ratepayers of South Carolina deserve that we do so thoughtfully but without delay. I'd like to thank and recognize Ms. Marcia Adams, Director of the Department of Administration, and her entire team for their Herculean efforts and their dogged persistence in keeping this process on track. Ms. Adams, would you please stand and let us thank you? One of the main responsibilities of government is to provide for the safety of the people. We are all aware of the struggles facing the men and women working at our Department of Corrections. Contraband, violence, gangs, staffing shortages, health care deficiencies. Ladies and gentlemen, this has got to change. I ask that we invest at least $100 million towards making our prisons safer and more secure, both inside and outside defense, by replacing and repairing existing infrastructure, facilities, and control systems. We are losing valuable and experienced personnel from our agencies, and they are unable to remain competitive with pay and benefits in other areas. Our highways are dangerous without troopers on patrol. Every school must have a resource officer on duty all day. Fires must be battled and contained. Justice requires investigations to be properly conducted. Correctional facilities need guards, and our waterways and lakes must remain safe and navigable. I ask that we dedicate at least $60 million in new dollars to law enforcement, public safety, and first response agencies for recruitment and retention. And this includes pay raises for troopers, SLED agents, wildlife officers, probation officers, firefighters, correction officers, forestry, and emergency services personnel. This will also complete the placement of a school resource officer in every school in the state. You know, it is often said that the men and women of the Highway Patrol are the face of law enforcement in South Carolina. I ask that we direct $5 million for the sole purpose of hiring 100 new troopers by the end of this year and paying them more than local law enforcement agencies can match. Recently, I appointed North Charleston Police Chief Reggie Burgess to serve as the next director of the Department of Public Safety. Chief Burgess is one of the finest leaders our state has ever produced. His career achievements are remarkable. I am confident that he will do an excellent job recruiting and retaining additional highly qualified troopers, addressing challenges and taking morale and public confidence to new heights. Chief Burgess is with us here tonight with his wife Tracy and their children Reggie and Kristen. Please join me in welcoming them. You know that South Carolina is quite rightly, proudly, a military state. During times of national or state emergency, we call on the South Carolina National Guard to do many things. They deploy and defend this nation. They evacuate and secure our coast. These brave men and women are known around the world for their service and sacrifice. However, the conditions of many of their armories are unsafe, unusable, or inadequate for training and drill. I have proposed a significant reinvestment to improve the condition of the National Guard armories in the state, and I ask you to join me in this commitment. Today, we have more than 50,000 active duty and reserve military personnel. We have 8 major military installations, and we have more than 400,000 veterans in our state. We must ensure that our veterans and their dependents receive the benefits and services that they have earned over a lifetime of protecting our country, and that they have the opportunity to utilize their talents in the civilian workforce. I was proud to work with you, the General Assembly, to support legislation creating the South Carolina Department of Veterans Affairs to be led by a secretary to act as their advocate on the state and federal level. That man is here tonight, a top graduate of the Citadel with 4 combat tours in Iraq and service in the South Carolina House of Representatives. Lieutenant Colonel Bobby Cox is joined by his wife, Jocelyn, and their children, Reagan and Seth. Please stand and be recognized. Thank you. Today's the anniversary of the United States Supreme Court's decision in Roe against Wade. Ladies and gentlemen, the right to life is the most precious of rights and the most fragile. We must never let it be taken for granted. For the 3rd year in a row, my budget includes a proviso preventing the funneling of taxpayer dollars to abortion providers like Planned Parenthood. And you are now considering 2 important pieces of legislation. Both will protect the sanctity of life through the heartbeat or personhood. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to take a vote. Send them to me and I'll immediately sign them into law. Thank you. And you know, we face recruitment and retention challenges not only with teachers, troopers, soldiers, and guards, but also with the valuable talent at our state agencies. Our booming economy and record low employment sometimes put agencies at a disadvantage against the private sector. Government should take some lessons from successful businesses. I'm convinced that across-the-board pay raises for state employees are less effective than those based on performance, merit, success, or experience. Therefore, I ask that you provide $33 million, almost the equivalent of a 2% across-the-board pay raise, and direct that those funds go to agency directors to be used for merit-based raises. Now, excessive government regulation is, as they say, the #1 cause of death for businesses, both large and small, and also the bane of investment. 2 years ago, I issued an executive order instructing state agencies to evaluate, before issuing regulations, any unintended consequences or undue burdens those regulations may place on South Carolina businesses. This year, Senator Tom Davis has agreed to sponsor legislation that would require the governor's office to submit to the General Assembly on an annual basis recommendations for the elimination, withdrawal, or modernization of any statutes, regulations, policies, protocols, boards, commissions, offices, positions, or practice. I've asked Lieutenant Governor Evatt to implement this law upon enactment and to seek input and suggestions from businesses on what to eliminate, change, or modify. I ask you to work with us. Let's work together to unleash innovation, investment, and emerging technologies by passing this bill promptly. And that brings us to our state prison pension system. We've all been hearing the alarm bell for many years. We must maintain our commitment to 11.5% of South Carolinians who rely on the state retirement systems. And we must also protect the taxpayers from bearing any additional financial burden caused by inaction or indecision or anything else. The best answer is a date-certain transition away from defined benefit pension plans to defined contribution plans for new state employees. I'm asking that we, at the end of this year, close enrollment in the current defined benefit plan. Putting money into an open system like that is like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain open. We must close the enrollment first and then act. As you're aware, last year, as in years past, I vetoed over $20 million in pass-throughs inserted into the state budget under vague, broad descriptions like parks revitalization and sports marketing. It's become a bad habit, a routine exercise of votes and vetoes between the governors and the General Assembly. Clearly, these appropriations should be publicly disclosed, debated, and allowed to stand on their own merits, like all other measures. Failing that, I offer a Plan B. Plan B suggests that equivalent funds be provided to the same agencies as last year, but with the requirement that they be awarded through a public, competitive grants process with full reporting of all actions. Under this plan, funds would be made available to applicants with demonstrated community support and with missions that advance the agency's All applications and awards will be placed on the agency's website within 15 days, allowing for public scrutiny and total transparency. Ladies and gentlemen, maintaining the public's trust in government at all levels requires transparency and accountability on how and why every single taxpayer dollar is spent. That also means stronger and expanded authority for the State Ethics Commission. We must change the law to require anyone who is paid to influence decisions made by county, municipal, or school board officials to publicly register with the Ethics Commission as a lobbyist. And public officials in all branches of government at all levels must be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Good government must have the confidence of the people. Good government means protecting the health and well-being of our people. That includes our young people and vulnerable adults. In March, I nominated Mr. Michael Leach to serve as director of the South Carolina Department of Social Services. Mr. Leach is a trained mental health clinician, and in less than 1 year, he has brought transformative leadership to DSS, reigniting the passions of his employees and reforming those processes which required reevaluation. Director Michael Leach, please stand and be recognized. As you well know, this year we escaped the wrath of a major hurricane. We've had 4 major flooding disasters between 2015 and 2018, and we'll have more. These events caused 37 deaths and harm to nearly 150,000 homes. Damages exceeded $800 million, with an estimated total loss of $300 million in tourism dollars alone. In the 1 year since the creation of the South Carolina Floodwater Commission, we have seen multifaceted communication, collaboration, and cooperation among its members across all levels of government, academia, the military, the private sector, and non-governmental organizations. Their goal, to protect and enhance our prosperity and happiness by finding ways and means to make these waters our friend. Thousands of volunteer hours have gone into producing the Commission's historic, unique report, which addresses our many challenges with unprecedented scope and thoroughness. It's now time to act. We must take action to address our state's drainage systems. We must protect, replenish, and expand our marshes. We must develop centralized, streamlined resiliency and response plans. We must ensure that local governments have the means to access much-needed recovery funds. We must plant more native vegetation to deter erosion and aid in groundwater infiltration. And we must collaborate and support innovative efforts like those envisioned in Charleston through the Dutch dialogues. Our commission will continue its vigorous discussions regarding the flood-related challenges that we all face, and I am confident that we can be a model for other states. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I want to say South Carolina is winning. We are in the midst of a stunning economic resurgence with opportunities to seize prosperity for generations to come. We recognize our tremendous assets. We acknowledge our challenges. And we believe in faith, we believe in family, we believe in the flag, and we believe in free markets. We believe in liberty. We believe in that shining city on the hill of which President Reagan spoke so eloquently years ago. And we know that liberty is worth fighting for. I'm here to say for all of us that our resolve will not wane and will not falter. As your governor, my determination is stronger than ever to fight for you, to fight for the ideals we all share, to fight for South Carolina. There's no place on this earth I would rather be, and there's nothing I would rather do. This year, let us roar into the 20s with renewed purpose. Let us be bold. Let us act on behalf of the sons and daughters of South Carolina so that they may receive a state as bright with promise as that which we were blessed to inherit. God bless you. God bless the great state of South Carolina.
You just heard Governor Henry McMaster deliver his
Members of the General
2020
Assembly.
State of the State address. Now we go to the Democratic message from House Minority Leader Todd Rutherford of Columbia.
Good evening. My name is Todd Rutherford. I represent the people of House District 74 in Richland County, and I serve as the House Democratic leader in the South Carolina General Assembly. Moments ago, we heard from Governor McMaster. Rhetoric aside, the fact is that Republicans have been in charge of our state for nearly 20 years straight, long enough to be responsible for the very problems that they claim to be solving. Year after year, we see these same problems go from bad to worse. This year, our attention again is on public education. And like they do every few years, Republicans will pass a bill, call it reform, and then call it a day. That cannot be the case this time. Last spring, we heard from 10,000 teachers rallying on the Statehouse grounds demanding that Republican leadership finally listen to them. For years, Republicans in power refused to listen to the teachers when they said that they can't afford to live and raise their own children. They refused to listen when they said that they can't effectively teach in crowded and decrepit classroom conditions, which our state has failed to fix for decades. Only now, after teachers have forced the issue, do Republicans say that education is a priority. South Carolina consistently ranks behind the rest of the nation in education, yet we don't do anything about it. Last year, Democrats proposed raising base student funding, paying teachers more, providing counselors in every school, providing for law enforcement officers in every school, and Republicans voted down all of these. They don't get it. We know the problems that plague education. We cannot plead ignorance. We must fix these funding issues once and for all. Now, I applaud the governor for coming out in support of universal 4K education. I'd like to see all of us expand on this. If a child can be potty trained, that child can learn. Universal preschool education is what we need. Let's send the message that we value education from the time you're out of diapers to the time you're on a diploma or a degree. I want to be clear. Universal 4K education is a great idea. I know it's a great idea because Democrats in the State House have been begging our Republican colleagues to do it for decades. Far too often, that's what happens. At the State House, a Democrat will propose an idea, Republican leadership will ignore it, and then years later, a Republican says it, and we all clap for it. Now, I don't care about who gets the credit. I care about getting results. So, to Governor McMaster and my colleagues in the House and Senate, I ask you to try a new approach. I ask you to think big. The biggest thing we do every year in the State House is pass the state budget. This year, we have what Republicans are calling a surplus. Now, I don't understand how we can say we have a surplus when government programs across the state have been operating at a deficit for years. We cannot afford to waste this money. A tax rebate would be nothing more than a gimmick from the governor, and we don't need another one of those. Instead, we should use this money to fulfill our duty to protect the most vulnerable among us. I am sick and tired of children dying from abuse and neglect because of our dysfunctional Department of Social Services agency. Currently, DSS is spending just $540 per month per child in custody. As usual, our funding is well below the Southeastern average, and our children are paying the price. These are our children, and they deserve better. Thankfully, DSS has a new director, but we have the same governor and the same Republican Party in power that allowed this to happen in the first place. I wish the people of South Carolina knew just how much time and money Republicans waste in Columbia. DSS got sued for the reasons I just mentioned, and now the state must pay out over $120 million. The Department of Corrections continues to get sued for multiple cases and continues to make massive payouts as a result. The governor wants to simply throw more money at the problem when we need a total overhaul of our broken prison system. We must pass sentencing reform this year. We cannot keep spending taxpayer money unwisely, incarcerating people who simply do not need to be there. Other southern states have already done this, other Republican states, and we need to follow their lead. The governor continues to call for an abortion ban. Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey said it best when he said he's seen this movie before and he doesn't want to see it again. In case you don't know, this movie ends with paying a lot of money to a lot of lawyers and total gridlock in the General Assembly, all to pass a bill that even its supporters say is unconstitutional. Let's quit wasting money on lawsuits we cannot win in court. Let's quit wasting time on divisive issues when we should be working hard to find common ground. I believe the budget surplus must be invested back in our state and its citizens through funding our education system, our healthcare system, and providing our public employees and better raises and providing for public services. But that's not enough. It's my hope that we leverage the current economic status and pass a bond bill that invests in our future. Interest rates are at historic lows, and fiscally responsible advisors, conservative advisors, believe now is the time to pass a bond bill to fix our crumbling infrastructure. But the fact is, state government needs new sources of revenue. We can't rely on surpluses. We know the old Republican math simply does not add up. It's time to legalize, regulate, and tax gambling. We've seen neighboring states benefit from modernizing their gaming laws. Just last year, Mississippi raised over $100 million in revenue and generated billions in total economic impact through its state-regulated gaming system. We're missing out on that, and we're losing those tourism dollars. That's right, in Mississippi, they say, thank God for South Carolina. I believe now it is time for South Carolina to take its turn. We already saw successes with the education lottery under Governor Jim Hodges. Republicans at that time claimed the sky would fall, yet here we are, providing opportunity for more and more students to pursue college degrees each year. Yet Republican leaders refuse to explore the issue. Republican leaders refuse to let the people of this state vote on it. However, I trust the people of South Carolina, and I'm not afraid of letting the people make their own choice about the important issues that we face. Just as I'm not afraid to let patients and their doctors decide if medical cannabis is right for them. We've seen the devastating effects of the opioid crisis across our state and across our country, yet Republican leadership stands in the way of this much safer alternative. We know that medical marijuana can help a cancer patient going through chemo. We know that it can help a veteran suffering from PTSD, and we know that other states have regulated it in a safe and effective way. A medical marijuana bill can pass this year if Republicans in leadership allow the House and Senate to vote on it. Now, these are just a few ideas. I know I don't have all the answers, and to the governor, to my colleagues in the House, and my friends in the Senate, let's work together to tackle the challenges we face. We can make South Carolina not just a great place to be for a business, but also for our workers, for state employees, and for our people. Let's support growth and good-paying jobs. Let's support paid family leave, which is the biggest single thing we can do to combat the gender pay gap, and directly support our working families. We can make South Carolina a great place for health care. That means supporting our rural hospitals. I don't ever want to meet another person who tells me that it takes them an hour to get to the closest emergency room because their local hospital shut down. If we plan on saving our rural hospitals, we must expand Medicaid, as 37 other states have already done, red states and blue states alike, and that will provide our coverage to thousands of our neighbors. We can make South Carolina's government work for everyone. Let's make it easier to vote, not harder. Let's draw fair district lines so that voters pick their politicians, not the other way around. Let's cut the noise and work together where there's bipartisan consensus on issues like criminal justice reform. We must expand broadband coverage so that more than 500,000 South Carolinians who are still without it can have access to the internet. Tackling these issues is how we improve our quality of life, ensure our economic stability, and plan for future growth. We must preserve our natural resources for our children and our grandchildren. Let's fight for clean air and clean water for every community, and let's continue to fight to protect our coast from offshore drilling. South Carolina, we can do all of these things, but only if we, the people, demand it. Thank you, God bless you, and may God bless the state of South Carolina.
And you just heard from House Minority Leader Todd Rutherford giving the Democratic message. And now I'm in the Statehouse lobby and going to talk to some lawmakers, get their reaction from what the governor just said this evening. And I'm joined with Representative Carl Anderson from Georgetown. Sir, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Tell me a little bit about what you heard from the governor's speech tonight. You've been here several times. We heard from you last year, first up too. What stood out to you this year?
The address was good. The governor said a lot of good things. We're looking forward to it. We have $1.8 billion in surplus in the nation state of South Carolina. That's telling us that South Carolina is on the rise. We've got new businesses coming in. We've got jobs available for everyone. And so I look forward to the tax cut, personal tax cut. I look forward also to what the governor said about us giving a rebate back to every taxpayer, at least $200 or more. I look forward to the things that he said about giving our teachers a $3,000 raise, but also my thing is we should look at every state employee across the state. Every state employee should get a raise, along with the income tax raise needs to be there also. And also the minimum wage. We need to consider increasing the minimum wage across the nation state of South Carolina.
And you're a Democrat. You talked about the tax cut the governor's proposing. Are other Democrats on board with these tax cuts, these tax rebates as well?
Yes, we've been talking about this for years. We've been asking for this for years. We've been asking for the education system. We've been asking for the job system. We've been asking for the raise for not only our educators, but all state employees. And so I was happy tonight to hear him say that we're going to do some of those things. Also our students, our kids. That's what the problem is. We need to make sure that resources are there for our school children. That was said tonight also. Taking the 4-year-olds across the whole state of South Carolina, making sure they are there for a full day. Parents, guardians, grandparents don't have to worry about half days for students. That's one great thing also. Then he talked about the military, talked about those active persons in the military, full 100% scholarship.
Great proposals that have bipartisan support is what it sounds like.
We just got to make sure that all of this stuff is carried out. This is 2020. Yep. Make sure it's carried out. He talked about the flooding. I'm down in District 103. We have a serious problem with the flooding because all of the water from this state comes down to Georgetown and goes out in the basin. So we really need to look forward to that. We need to look forward to affordable housing to make sure that our people have the right things that they need.
A lot of proposals, it sounds like,
have bipartisan support. There,
so
but we're looking forward to working with
I got some more people coming in. Thank you very much for talking with us. And we got Representative Bill Taylor. Sir, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Just want to get your thoughts on the governor's speech tonight. What stood out to you? We're talking about having a $1.8 billion surplus, how you think that should be spent, and if you agree with what the governor's proposing.
Well, I think the governor's right on as far as most of his priorities. Look, I think he hit the right tone. We are in the roaring 20s. I mean, it's 100 years since the last roaring 20s, but this is the roaring 20s. And the economy's great. South Carolina is just sparkling with its economy. We've got jobs that need to be filled and we need to work on our education, but his priorities about supporting our law enforcement, supporting our teachers, I mean, that additional money needs to be spent, but most importantly, he talked about returning money to the taxpayers, but more importantly, long-term cutting our income tax. I've served on a tax committee here in the South Carolina House for a number of years. We can do this. We're being beaten by our competitors in Georgia and North Carolina. And with his impetus, we need to get this done. Our House bill has been filed. We need to have it addressed.
What's the big speed bump from getting that moving? We've been talking about tax reform a lot. You know, the governor's always been talking about. We've been seeing the committee meetings for it. What's holding that up? Are we going to see movement on that this year?
Unfortunately, in South Carolina, the legislature tends to move a bit slowly. And That's unfortunate because this is something that needs to be done to keep us competitive. We need to lower our income tax rate. Our tax committee has proven that it can be done. We've modeled it. We know where it can be done. We just need to have it addressed. So I think the governor's on the absolute right course. We need to invest in our teachers and in law enforcement. The number one job of government is public safety. And we are short police officers, troopers, DNR officers, and resource officers in our schools.
And money also for the prisons as well. So a
Yes,
lot in
sir.
there for public safety.
Yes,
Thank you
sir.
very much, Representative. We
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
This. Thank you.
Thank you. We got Senate Minority Leader Nikki Setzler.
you doing?
How you doing, sir?
Doing great, thank
Great.
you. How are you doing?
Good. So, sir, you lead the Senate, the Democrats in the Senate.
Exactly.
I want to get your your idea about how everyone's feeling about the governor's budget proposal when we talk about the Democrats' response to the governor's proposals, and then just what you heard in the speech tonight. I mean, is there a lot of room there for compromise and to work together with the governor?
Well, I
when it
think
comes
it's all our responsibility to work together on behalf of the people of South Carolina. And of course, we've worked for a number of years to expand four-year-old kindergarten across this state, and we welcome the governor in joining us in that effort in being able to go to the additional 17 school districts. Same thing with teacher salaries. Teacher salaries have been low. We've been pushing for doing that. All of that education agenda we have been involved in and trying, and so we look forward to working with him or him working with us to get that accomplished. Higher education has been underfunded in this state. We fought for that and to cap tuition, and that's a part of what he's proposing. So I think it's an agenda that we will all look at. We will have differences, but it's our responsibility to work together and come to the best solution for what's best for South Carolina.
When you look at those funding proposals specifically for education, for teacher pay raises,
Right.
for 4K, do we align with those? Do you all align with those, or does it need to be more or less what he's proposing?
I absolutely think we would support and do support and have supported higher teacher salaries, and I think $3,000 at a minimum is reasonable. I think also the expansion of 4K, as I mentioned, funding higher education, more need-based scholarships, which we've been fighting for. So all of those are things that we will be working with him on to try to accomplish on behalf of this state.
And the governor briefly talked about Santee Cooper, the state-owned utility, Santee Cooper. I want to get your thoughts. We're still waiting a report on what to do with Santee Cooper. What happens when that report comes out in the coming days? How do you see that working through the Senate, through the House? I mean, he didn't say, I want you all to sell it. He said, I want you to thoughtfully look at these proposals and then act. So,
well, of course, the Senate is known for being thoughtful and deliberative and reasonable and responsible in our approaches to legislation. I've spent 22 months of my life with Senator Massey and the Santee Cooper issue. When it comes to us, I think under the legislation, Finance Committee has 30 days, then it goes to the floor of the Senate, and I think you'll see the Senate debate that, all three proposals, and do what they think is best for this state.
are we going to see that? Is that what we're trying to see? Education move through really quick before we get onto Santee Cooper?
Well, I think education is so important to this year when we've got an opportunity to all have it on the floor, debate it across the board. I think that's a tremendous opportunity for us.
Gotcha.
Thank
you very much, Senator. Appreciate it. Now we have Senator John Scott joining us. Hey there, Senator. How are you doing, sir? You gave that Democratic response last year.
I did.
I guess you're glad you're off the hook this year.
That's fine. I enjoyed it.
But what did you hear in the governor's address this year that stood out to you? I was just talking to your leader in the Senate. Sounds like you guys are unified on some of his big proposals, especially with education.
I think the $3,000 to teachers, I think we unified on that. The increases to state employees, especially firefighters and others, were unified. I was really concerned about when it got to regular state employees, the 2% merit base when everybody else got cost of living. I thought that may have been a little unfair. He also talked about investing $50 million back into rural school districts, working with tech schools and regular schools. He talked about a match. And last year we gave the governor's office $100 million. Of course, that money should have been invested back in bringing businesses and also in helping those districts. There's 70,000 jobs, he said, that are out there. Most of those jobs are probably going to be found in rural communities, and how we use now will end up being $200 million to make sure that those rural counties have the opportunity to hire some people. Rural communities are losing people to come into the urban setting. At some point, we're really going to have to address those particular issues. As it relates to tuition, to 5%, I thought that was pretty good. We did good last year, but he made no mention about historical black colleges and universities. They have needs too, but he mentioned doing some deferred maintenance on historical buildings. I'm hoping historical buildings also meant historical universities such as HBCUs. I think we've got something to begin to work with. We just have to see how things kind of worked out. The giveaway back to the community of $200, I'm not sure that we may need to do all of that. Some of that money may be best fit for other projects since we've not had a bond bill in over 20 years.
I guess it's hard to sell a bond bill when they say when there's $1.8
billion. We got $1 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, but let's make sure that we don't throw it away. We actually fix some things we need to fix.
So it sounds like it'll be a very interesting budget.
It should be. It should be. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much.
It.
Yeah, thank you.
Now we have Senator Tom Davis of Beaufort. Senator, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You were special. You got a shout out from the governor in his speech today. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit about what he was talking about, what your new role might be with this legislation that you're proposing?
Right. What Governor McMaster was referring to is that over the last 40 to 50 years, we've accumulated a lot of regulations and statutes and things of that nature that really are outmoded and outdated and act as a drag on business. And starting last summer, I was working with the governor's chief of staff, and coming up with a way where we can systemically every year look at which regulations are outmoded and strip them out of the code so that we don't have that clutter in there. And I'm glad to be recognized for that. Look forward to delivering for them.
Senator, we're talking about Santee Cooper coming up. We're trying to wait for those proposals to come to the Department of Administration. How do you see that playing out when we get those proposals about, whether to sell Santee Cooper and what the future of Santee Cooper holds? How do you see this playing out? Is it going to be a huge situation for the Senate and the House to debate this? Is it going to take all the air out of the session essentially when these come out?
Well, it'll certainly be a primary thing to be debating. I don't think it'll take all the oxygen out of the room. I think that ever since we had that failure in Fairfield County where $9 billion was put into the ground and wasted in terms of those nuclear facilities, woke the legislature up at about how we produce, distribute, and transmit energy in South Carolina. Last year we passed the Energy Freedom Act, opening up energy production markets. This year we're going to take on the state-owned utility and see if we can do something about that. So I'm really encouraged that he emphasized that. I'm told that February 3 is when the recommendation comes to us, and I look forward to the debate.
Is it going to be a heated debate? How do you foresee it going? It sounds like the House is already interested in just selling it. The governor's interested in selling it. How do you see it happening in the Senate?
I think that reads it pretty well. Governor McMaster has made his intent and desire clear, as has the House. Over in the Senate, we're always a little bit more deliberative over there. I wouldn't say it's heated, but I think that people are emotional about this. There are certain people that have a long history with Santee Cooper. I respect that. But at the end of the day, in the 21st century, there really is no business for the state to be involved in energy production. And their involvement in energy production is one of the things that led to that failure in Fairfield County. So I hope at the end of the day we end up selling it.
And really quick, I want to talk to you about the additional $1.8 billion in the budget. The governor's proposing giving some money back to people. Do you support that? Do you think that's enough that he's proposing, or should we give more? And also talking about that 1% tax that he wants to start implementing.
I mean, he's absolutely right. I mean, the money is more productive in the private sector. And the more money we take out of the private sector and spend in government, the less yield we get on that money. So I like his proposal to send 25% of it back to the taxpayers in the form of a rebate and also a recurring tax cut to the income tax rate. I like his focus on classroom teachers. I'm really excited about getting our classroom teachers into the upper top 25 in the country, not just Southeastern average, not just national average, but 25th in the nation. If we want to improve education in our state, it starts with the teachers. It starts with respecting them in a classroom. It starts with paying them what they're worth. It starts by listening to them. And I was really proud of him putting emphasis on that.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we got Senator Greg Hembry from Horry County, and you're also the Senate Education Committee Chairman.
Right.
All eyes on you this week. We're already debating the Senate Education Bill in the Senate. Give us a little bit of update. I know we want to talk about the governor's speech, but I want to get your take on where things are right now with that Senate Education Bill. You guys have put on priority status. How's that shaping up in the Senate, and what's that debate looking like?
Well, it's a sweeping bill, covers a lot of different subjects. So, and there are people that object to it. There are groups that object to it. When you do anything that's that large, a 62-page bill, it's like I've said over and over again. There's going to be something in that bill that everybody hates. The school boards are going to hate a piece. The teachers are going to hate a piece because it covers so many subjects. So we're wading through those challenges right now in the debate. It's been a healthy debate for the last few days, so we'll see where we land in the next few days.
And you don't call it an overhaul bill, you kind of call it just like tweaking some of these things. What are some of the things you guys want to talk about addressing this bill?
Things like we eliminate some testing. There are many elements. It's got 52 sections. There are lots of adjustments, updating language, and then there are some things that are really changed. Probably the biggest change has to do with the assistance and intervention in failing schools and districts by the state superintendent. So that really does have some substantive change, and I think can make a real positive difference if we can get that through.
And we heard the governor say he wants that bill sent to his desk as soon as possible. What's the governor telling you about the bill that you guys have, that you guys spent all year working on last year and now are debating?
Well, I agree with the governor. I want to get it to his desk as soon as possible. Certainly there's going to be challenges reconciling our version with the House version, whatever. Assuming we're able to get something out. So, that's a process, and I'm glad to hear the governor mention it. It puts pressure on both houses to come together and find some common ground.
And how much common ground is there in the Senate debate? At least, are we seeing enough support to move the bill along, or are we going to see a drawn-out debate?
Oh, it'll be a drawn-out debate. Yeah, and we anticipated that. There have been those that before we even knew what the bill was going to be, pledged to filibuster the bill and try to kill it. So, when you start from that place, you know that you have a challenge. But that's, the way our rules are written. That's the way the Senate works. It's deliberative, and it's a healthy process, but it can be a frustrating process.
And you've said before, this is also year 2 of this big push for education. That there's still next year to do things too. And we're talking about the budget too. The governor's proposing $3,000 pay raises for teachers across the board. Do you think that's the best way to go forward with pay raises, or how do you think, is that the best way to appropriate money when it comes to teacher pay raises?
Well, there are some other ideas on that. Quite frankly, I think the districts need to have more flexibility. I think that money needs to go back to the districts to be used exclusively for teacher pay raises, classroom teacher pay raises. However, I would give the districts flexibility in how they spend that money. If they want to do a flat across the board pay increase, give them that opportunity. However, if they have a shortage of math teachers and they want to give an enhancement, a supplement for to hire more math teachers to kind of fill the local needs, we can't do that at the state level. We don't know what the local community needs. They know better than we do. So we need to give them the freedom to be able to address those needs with that money.
Gotcha. So raises, but looking forward to the merit. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think it's. I'm glad to hear about the raises. I strongly support and I'm so appreciate the governor getting us started on that path, and especially the second thing that I was thrilled to hear about tonight was the expansion of 4K. We know that that's a good investment of money. When we know that we can have more of an impact on students earlier rather than later.
Gotcha. Thank you, Senator. We're watching that debate.
Thanks very much.
Representative Caesar McKnight, Williamsburg County, how are you?
Great, how are you doing?
Good. I just want to tell you, give me a little idea about what you heard from that speech from the governor. You're a Democrat, he's a Republican. Anything stand out to you? Any common ground or any big disagreements?
There's more common ground than disagreements, I'm proud to say that. I have been cautiously optimistic about the plan laid out by Governor McMaster. The education bill was a great start, and so there were some things that I liked. The things that I did not like, I don't like the fact that we're changing the pension plan. Essentially what that'll do is it'll cause anybody that's a new teacher, firefighter, or whatever to basically be on a 401k. I think one of the tacit agreements or covenants we've made with people is that if they go into public service, they may not get paid a lot, but they'll get taken care of on the back end, speaking primarily about retirement. So I don't necessarily like that. The other thing that I don't like is I understand that there's a push to give back monies in the form of rebates. However, my district's along the corridor of shame. We haven't built a brand new high school in my legislative district since 1970. So we really need some more money directed at helping those districts that just do not have the tax base. And I think that the governor could have been more creative. I appreciate the fact that we have a surplus, if you want to call it that, but just sending it, a quarter of it back, I don't think is fiscally sound given the needs that we have here in South Carolina.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And we got Representative Wendell Gilliard, another Democrat. How you doing, sir?
Doing
Good.
Fine, doing fine.
Just want to hear your thoughts. I'm wondering if you have any common ground with what the governor was talking about, or anything that stood out to you that you like that might actually be going forward in your opinion this year in the session.
Well, this has been one of the most quite laid back state of the state, and that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. And I think he was true with his intent. And I read the whole state of the state, and I feel that while his intentions might be true, he's just not doing enough. When we talk about teachers' pay raises, state employees' pay raises, we have to stop piecemealing it. 2% here, 2% there. Look, 15% across the board for the state workers, okay? When it comes to our educators here in the state of South Carolina, the minimum should be $55,000, because if we don't do that, the exodus will continue. We will lose our teachers to North Carolina and Georgia. And then I was taken back because nothing was mentioned about the teachers' Bill of Rights. They are the experts. Let them guide us. We are here for we the people. It's not I the party. or I, the governor, or I, the representative. We have to listen to our teachers. Who better else to listen to? They're the experts. And we have to understand. And another thing, not one thing was mentioned about the increase of the homeless population here in the state of South Carolina. It's still a problem. You know, we must funnel monies, new ideas, as to decrease the homeless population here in the state of South Carolina. There should not be one homeless people here in the state of South Carolina. I don't care what nobody says. And this thing with the school bus, and I'm gonna be adamant about it, we need to do away with the school bus. Privatize all the school bus, take that $100 million, put toward education, new curriculums in these schools, etc. And one last thing, the hate crime. I've introduced the hate crime bill here in the state of South Carolina, House Bill 3063. South Carolina is now one of 4 states that don't have a hate crime bill. Hate organizations are on the rise. Racism, prejudice is still here, and we just well be on the side that we call right. We need a hate crime here in the state of South Carolina. And my house, the bill is House Bill 3063. It's my hate crime bill.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time.
More than welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
And now we have Representative Josiah Magnuson. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
A Republican. Tell me your thoughts about what the governor had to say tonight. Anything that stood out to you, something you maybe disagree with or as a Republican or agree with as a Republican?
Yes, so I was very happy with a lot of what the governor had to say, a lot of solid conservative Republican priorities in it. I liked some of the school choice aspects. I liked some of the, he talked a lot about the free market and the importance of keeping business strong in South Carolina. I did like some of the tax reform, and I'd like for him to actually go further with that. I would love to see income tax eliminated in South Carolina. I think we've got some of the states around us with no income tax at all, but I think at least we need to be competitive with our neighbors, North Carolina and Georgia. The governor mentioned that a little bit, and so I would like to see us move from a top rate of 7% to a 4.5% flat tax. But I'll tell you, the thing that really excited me the most was, for the first time in history, as far as I'm aware, we had the governor mention the Personhood Act. And the Personhood Act is my bill that would actually protect life at conception. So it would basically end all abortion, and it would protect, give equal protection to unborn children. And I would love to see us pass that bill.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know that bill had some difficulties years before, and then the Senate now has the fetal heartbeat bill on its calendar. Unclear about when that's going to be debated, but it sounds like there are passionate people on both sides of this bill, and
sure,
it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Have you heard anything otherwise if that bill is going to make it back to the House this year?
I would love to see the heartbeat bill come back to the House too. I think the Senate needs to bring it to a vote. I hope that all the Republicans will vote together and stand strong. We need to protect innocent life. That, to me, is the most important priority of government, is justice for the innocent. So I'm looking forward to passing either the personhood or the heartbeat bill.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yep. Now we got Representative J.A. Moore, right off the campaign trail. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Just want to get your thoughts on the governor's proposals tonight. You as a Democrat want to see if you have anything in common with what he had to say or anything that you might have differed with.
Well, look, I think what was very important that I heard him talk about tonight, and he's talked about it earlier, is the focus on early childhood education. My mom and my dad ran a nonprofit organization for over 25 years, focused specifically on early childhood education. So I'm excited to hear the governor talk about that. I definitely agree with that. And it's a continued focus on mental health awareness and wellness in our public school. We just passed 3257 in the House. It's going over to the Senate now, and I'm looking forward for the governor to support that as well. So I was very pleased to those things. So yes.
Do you feel like the Democrats in the House have a lot in common with what the governor's been proposing? We saw a lot of similarities last year, a lot of proposals go forward with a lot of support. Do you feel the same way this year when we look at the governor's budget and what he just said in the State of the State address?
What I believe that here in South Carolina, we do a lot of things on a bipartisan effort. So I don't know if it's Democrat or Republican, these issues. The issues are protecting people in South Carolina. So yeah, there was a lot of things in the governor's budget that I think both sides can agree on. So I'm excited to work with the governor, and obviously there's some differences, but we'll work through them.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, sir. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. I got Representative Annie McDaniel, sorry. How are you doing, ma'am?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. I just want to get your thoughts on the governor's budget. You're sitting in this House chamber here, the State of the State address with the governor. What do you think, what he had to say, and anything you agree with or disagree with?
Yes, I think overall it was a pretty decent budget. I think that he thought through a whole lot of the issues in the state of South Carolina, and he tried to address most of them. I think that sometimes we do not focus as much as we should on those folk who are less fortunate, and I think sometimes we don't realize that all they need is a jump start. So I think he probably could have done a little bit more for them. I noticed he didn't talk much about the pay raise for the teachers. So I hope that he is still, is somewhere in that he just didn't talk that much about it, funding for the teachers as well as all of the other state employees. I know he mentioned them, and he mentioned across the board raise, and he mentioned the merit pay that he didn't think it was really good. So I kind of agree with him in that respect to a certain degree, because it's been so long since we've given pay raises to our state employees.
Yeah, and do you think that's the best way to do it, merit-based, or do you think there should be more money going forward for that, or how do you think that we should maybe give pay raises to state employees?
Yes, I most definitely think that we should have more money going forward, but I think since it's been so long that the across the board is probably a good starting place. And before we leave real quickly, I just want to say that as far as health care, I maybe thought maybe he should have focused a little bit more on health care, because, you know, we had those 4 rural hospitals that closed in the rural areas, and I think we need to focus a little bit on how we're going to make good for those hospitals closing.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, ma'am.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
All right, Representative Jerry Govan. How are you doing, sir?
How you doing?
Good, good. And you're over the Legislative Black Caucus. I want to get your thoughts, looking at it from individually and perhaps from your caucus level, about what you saw the governor lay out in his proposals. Does your caucus agree with a lot of what he was laying out tonight in his budget, or where do you all stand when it comes to that?
Well, you know, the caucus's priority has always been in terms of education. And so in terms of the expansion of 4-year kindergarten and making kids more ready and prepared to learn and for entry into the system, that's very important to us. Early childhood education is essential. So we wholeheartedly agree with that. To see that the governor is moving in to the direction, if you would, moving to the more to the center. That is great news, and we just have to figure out all the details. The second thing that I think in terms of the providing funding for our first responders and those individuals, I thought that was a nice gesture for those serving in the military and the veterans and whatnot. I don't think we have any quibbles about that. They deserve that. They honor us with their sacrifice, or with their home, from their homes, their families, and sometimes with their blood and treasure. So we need to do that. So,
in those tax rebates, are you guys in favor of that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I'd like to see the details on that. You know, we gave out tax rebates last year, and considering the fact that there were some other pressing needs that needed to be addressed, we could have used those funds to address those issues. And when I talked to South Carolinians, a lot of them said they could have forewent the $60 or $50, whatever it was. I'd be hesitant to just rush down that road, but you know, I think it's something that we can talk about in terms of investing more in our infrastructure, in terms of education, in terms of addressing those things and equipping equipping these kids who are caught up into the prison to jail, the school to jail pipeline, stuff like that.
And we did hear more money going to fix South Carolina prisons too, which is, you know, vitally important, since we've seen, you know, riots, murders, a lot of things happening there, just never getting the funding that they needed. Is that $100 million that the governor's proposing, do you think that's a reality? Do you think that number is something that can actually make it through the Statehouse? That's a lot of money.
I think it can, but I think the money has to go more into things besides the brick and mortar aspect of it. I think what we need to do is truly invest in rehabilitating these individuals who are transitioning back to society, so you don't have the recidivism rate. I think that's absolutely critical to make them better citizens, to make them better equipped to be better taxpayers, and that's ultimately the goal, to get reinfused back into society. So we'll see what happens.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Representative Govan. I appreciate it.
Thank you for talking to us.
Yep. And that concludes SCETV's live coverage of the governor's 2020 State of the State address. But ETV's coverage of the State House does not end here. You can get daily news updates on South Carolina Public Radio. You can also listen to the South Carolina Lead podcast, which I host every Tuesday with the reporters who cover the State House each week. It's on your podcast app. And also check out This Week in South Carolina. It's a show I host every Friday evening at 7:30 p.m. with the newsmakers of the week. We talk about what's going on up here and statewide. I'm Gavin Jackson, and on behalf of all of us at South Carolina Public Radio and South Carolina ETV, thanks for watching and good night.